Milan Hain is assistant professor at Palace University in Olomouc in Czech Republic. He's also the area head of film studies. He is the author or co-author of almost half a dozen books on films and cinema, including films on David or Selznick and Hollywood in the 40s and 50s. He has published on Selznick and on Slovak theater, and he was a Fulbright visiting researcher at the University of California. And he is now at the university. No, he has a research fellowship, a visiting research fellowship at the University of Łódź, where he researches the representation of Czech and Polish identities in the studio era Hollywood. And he's now going to talk about a subject which we have actually talked about several times yesterday: to tell or not to tell the rhetorical strategies in trailers for films with a surprise twist.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm afraid that I'll be covering at least some of the territory that we've already covered yesterday and today. My talk, I think, connects with what Matthias was talking about and with Sebastian Smolinski's talk yesterday. So I'll be talking about spoilers as marketing strategy. And this is just the beginning. I've never made any research on this topic. But I started on IMDb. There are more than 4,000 feature films on IMDb with the label surprise ending. I cannot offer a systematic analysis of all of them, obviously, but I will focus on the trailers of a few selected films with the aim of identifying their rhetorical strategies regarding the presentation or withholding of information related to the plot twist. IMDb, if we can take it as a relevant resource, shows that surprise endings are common only in the last few decades. Between 1920 and 1970, there were just under 300 films, or there are 300 films, less than 300 films listed on IMDb. By contrast, between 1990 and 2022, we can find more than 3,000 titles. But precursors to films such as The Fight Club or The Sixth Sense go back at least to the 1940s, and that's where I will start my presentation. In the 1940s, we can, for example, find a series of films where a certain part of the narrative is revealed as a dream, and Matthias has talked or mentioned some of these films in his presentation. One of them is Fritz Lang's Woman in the Window, released in 1944. The trailer presents the film as a thrilling story of a man who, this is a quotation, who dared gamble a lifetime of honor for one exciting moment spent with an attractive woman. We have no idea until the last moment of the trailer that this is going to be something extraordinary. The story seems to be a variation on Double Indemnity, for instance, which was released a few months earlier than Woman in the Window. But the concluding title cards tell us that it is, quote, a supreme adventure in suspense with the most startling surprise ending ever filmed. We don't get a clue as to what it might be, but the highlighting of this twist serves as an enticement, a way of differentiating the picture from the competition, which means other films in which a man gets involved with a beautiful woman, which has far-reaching consequences for him. Other ways of promoting the film were also partly based on the allegedly undecipherable plot. There were advertisements in the period press and other publicity materials, which were very often tied to the ending of the film. At the same time, however, this opened the possibility of numerous disappointed reactions. Indeed, the dream motive was described as a mere gimmick in several contemporary reviews. And there you can see one of the articles that mentions this, the disappointed reaction. And on the right side of the slide, you can see that some of the very ingenious ways of how the studio was trying to promote the film. The same narrative device was used by films such as Strange Impersonation or The Chase, both from 1946, but unfortunately, I have not been able to track down their trailers, but at least I read several reviews, and indeed, David Bordwell in one of his blogs talks about that. Reviews very often revealed the surprising twists quite explicitly. Woman in the Window's promotional strategies form the first example that I was able to find of what Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock in his book on M. Night Shyamalan calls anticipated surprise. Of course, Shyamalan's movies are well known for their surprising endings, and it seems useful to quote at length what Weinstock has to say about them. He says, quote, "Because one can't speak about Shyamalan's films without discussing their endings, and one can't talk about the endings without discussing the rigor plot twists, viewers now ironically have been conditioned to anticipate precisely such an ironic reversal in any Shyamalan's film, which to a certain extent delimits the effectiveness of the plot twist. If one oxymoronically is prepared to be surprised, then the surprise arguably is a lesser order epistemological one. What will the surprise be, rather than an ontological one? I was not expecting any surprise at all." End quote. So this is the basic question that the makers of trailers and other promotional materials for the films I'm discussing also address. Should they reveal the very existence of the plot twist, thereby using it as a marketing tool, but perhaps also reducing the effect of the twist? Or should they hide it, but at the same time risking that the film will have less commercial pull, while the twist might still leak out as a result of comments from critics and fans? By the mid-1950s, it seems that it was not uncommon to refer to a surprise ending in promotion. Le Diabolique or The Bad Seed, which are two films that were mentioned yesterday, are good examples. But I will focus on a different case study, Witness for the Prosecution from 1957. This is Billy Wilder's adaptation of Agatha Christie's 1953 play, which in turn is based on her short story from the mid-1920s. The play was extremely successful in London and on Broadway, where it ran for more than 600 performances. So it kind of circulated that there was, at least in some circles, a knowledge of the play. The film itself ends just like Le Diabolique with a surprising twist, after which a voiceover urges the audience to remain silent. This is a quotation. "The management of this theater suggests that for the greater entertainment of your friends who have not yet seen the picture, you will not divulge to anyone the secret of the ending of Witness for the Prosecution," end quote. So this is the voiceover from the ending of the film. The marketing campaign for the film built heavily on the fact that it contains a shocking twist. For example, the poster uses the tagline, "It's climaxed by the 10 breath-stopping minutes you ever lived. Don't reveal the ending, please." And the same words appear in the trailer. The trailer privileges the star discourse and story discourse while flagrantly accentuating the enigma surrounding the character played by Marlene Dietrich, who is described as, quote, "the woman of mystery, a fascinating question mark." This provides a clue as to where to look for the source of film's duplicity. But on the other hand, the trailer contains a number of misleading pieces of information. For example, it presents Leonard, Tyrone Power's character, as a loving husband and questions Christine's love for him when the reality is just the opposite. An important motive in the trailer is that of pretending and lying. Charles Lawton, as the barrister, turns to Christine in the trailer at one point and asks, "Were you lying then, or are you lying now? Or are you in fact a chronic and habitual liar?" And in a way, this captures the essence of many trailers. At first, the question of whether or not the jury found defendant Leonard Wold guilty seems to be presented as the major narrative puzzle by the trailer. But in the last third of the trailer, Charles Lawton turns directly to the audience, stepping out of the character, and says, "Guilty or not guilty? We answer that question at the end of most mystery stories, but in Witness for the Prosecution, it is only at the beginning of a series of climaxes that I defy you to guess," end quote. So the main selling point was the twist-laden plot, which cannot or couldn't be easily predicted. And Charles Lawton says in the trailer, "You'll talk about this picture all right, but you'll never tell the ending to your friends because you won't want to spoil their excitement and their fun." The trailer ends with a notice, "To preserve the secret of the surprise ending, no patrons will be seated during the final 10 minutes of Witness for the Prosecution." This strategy has been known since at least Woman in the Window, where exhibitors were urged not to seat patrons 5 minutes before the end of the film. The marketing campaign for Wildest Picture significantly, even excessively, foregrounds the suspenseful narrative with surprising twists that, along with the star-studded cast, becomes the main attraction. But the trailer also distributes information cleverly and precisely so that the viewer cannot guess the twists and turns of the plot. I will also talk about Psycho, which came up yesterday in Sebastian's talk. The marketing campaign for Hitchcock's Psycho is often presented as groundbreaking, but we've seen that some aspects already featured in the campaigns for Witness for the Prosecution and even before. For instance, the film adopted the practice of not seating audience members at any time and took it even further than Witness for the Prosecution, where this was limited to the riveting climax. But with Psycho, the publicity materials proclaim that no one will be admitted to the theater after the start of each performance of Psycho. This may in part be related to the fact that Marianne's shocking murder comes not at the end, but about a third of the way through. At the same time, there was no attempt to hide that this was a clever marketing ploy. For example, the press book for the film says that it's a creation of Paramount Pictures showmanship. In order for this tactic to be implemented, it was necessary to clearly announce the start of screenings in advance, which was not quite the standard until then, but even this had a precedent. For instance, in the campaign surrounding Le Diabolique, and you can see a poster where it claims or states the same thing. The trailer for Psycho was obviously an important part of the campaign. As was typical at the time, it was built around the celebrity persona of director Alfred Hitchcock, who was a known public figure thanks to his films and his appearances in Alfred Hitchcock Presents. The trailer uses the same cynical style as himself as a guide to Norman's motel and neighboring house and teases the prospective audience with deliberately vague and misleading remarks such as, "In this house, the most dire, horrible events took place," or he says, "It was at the top of these stairs that the second murder took place," or, "Of course the victim, or shall I say victims, hadn't any conception as to the type of people they will be confronted with in this house, especially the woman." The trailer ends with the shower curtain being pulled down and a shot of a woman screaming. Curiously, it was not Janet Leigh, but Vera Miles who was featured in the trailer. Thanks in part to this campaign, Psycho became Hitchcock's most commercially successful film, with worldwide gross reported at around $32 million, an achievement that is all the more impressive because the budget was under $1 million. Psycho's promotion was very influential, impacting even the master of all gimmicks, William Castle. With Homicidal from 1961, Castle specifically disallowed people to be seated in the theater 15 minutes before the twist ending and offered a 45-second fright break, an opportunity for two terrified audience members to leave for the lobby and have their admission refunded at the coward's corner. And in one of the trailers, Castle questions audience members who've just seen Homicidal, making sure they won't disclose the surprise ending to anyone, and then addresses the trailer's audience, saying that if you reveal the movie's ending, your friends will kill you. And then he smiles, points directly at the camera and says, "And if they don't, I will." I have no data on whether this in fact happened. I hope not. But it's a very strange way of promoting the film. And at about the same time, there were other films that used the same tactics. These are two reviews from one page, and you can see that one of them refers to Le Diabolique and its ending, and the other one mentions the climaxes and even suggests gimmick to exhibitors how to promote the film Scream of Fear. And the picture at the bottom, this is from the trailer for Scream of Fear. So we can see that it's very much based on Psycho's promotion. A variation on the strategy that worked for Woman in the can be seen also in the trailer for Planet of the Apes from 1968. It first focuses on the fictional world where man is evolutionary inferior to the apes who have enslaved him. Then in itself is a very original plot, which until then had few parallels in film. However, the trailer promises even more. Charlton Heston steps out of his role, just like Charles Lawton did in Witness for the Prosecution, and he says directly to the audience, it did not end here. It ended in an episode so unpredictable, so shocking, that made the horror that preceded it seem calm and gentle as a summer's night. And the poster also promises that the astronaut will wing through the centuries and find the answer. He may find the most terrifying one of all. In the following period, however, this ostentatious emphasis on the surprise twist in marketing materials, including trailers, seems to have waned. Rather, the trailers contain only implicit hints at the twist, or they make an attempt to completely mask it. So I will present just two examples of both strategies. The first one is the Shawshank Redemption from 1994. The film contains the now famous wow moment when it turns out that, spoiler alert, Andy Dufferson who was sentenced to death to 2 life sentences, has been patiently building a tunnel to freedom for years. And the trailer gives the viewer quite a few clues to make him or her believe that Andy will indeed manage to escape from the high security prison. For one thing, there is the underlying motive of hope, quote, something inside they can touch, as Andy proclaims. Secondly, we see not only scenes from the prison, but also a shot of the sea, Andy's friend Red in the meadow, a shot of Andy with a rock trying to break through a sewer, and finally his triumphant gesture as the rain scrapes him. Also significant is the inclusion of a shot in which we see the prison guard and his shocked reaction. He says, "Oh my holy God," to some shocking revelation, which the film, however, glosses over. A similar strategy was used in the posters, where we see the image of Andy with his arms outstretched and his shirt torn as raindrops fall on him, and the slogan, "Fear can hold you prisoner, hope can set you free." It is therefore rather surprising how strong a reaction the ending provoked. After all, prison breaks are a standard element of prison films. The surprise, however, probably lies not in the fact that Andy eventually gets out of prison despite the bad prospects, but how he manages to do so. The audiences presumably hope all along that he will manage to break out of his oppressive environment, but because of the restricted and uncommunicative narration, they have no clues as to how he will do it. One of the most memorable films that already has been talked about is The Sixth Sense, which also served as a model for others, such as the Others. The pun is intended. The trailer contains no hint of a twist. It is dominated by story and genre rhetoric, presenting the film as a ghost story about a boy who sees dead people. Bruce Willis's character, revealed at the end of the film as one of these ghosts, seems to be merely the boy's mentor and advisor in the trailer. The trailer, along with other marketing tools, attempts to lure the audience by presenting the film as an atmospheric genre piece, with a shock coming only when confronted with the film text itself. So there is no hint at a twist. The ending, however, was commented upon by critics in the press quite heavily. Roger Ebert, for example, wrote, "I have to admit I was blindsided by the ending. The solution to many of the film's puzzlements is right there in plain view, and the movie hasn't cheated. But the very boldness of the storytelling carried me right past the crucial hints and right through to the end of the film, where everything takes on an intriguing new dimension." When Alejandro Amenabar's The Others was released, it was to be expected that many would compare it to The Sixth Sense. At the same time, there was a risk that the twist ending would not be perceived as too original and fresh, as Fight Club, for example, also worked with a similar concept. The trailer for The Others is built very similarly to The Sixth Sense. Emphasis is put on the horror atmosphere and the fact that children see dead people. The twist is concealed, but on some re-release posters, a quote from a review mentions the existence of the twist. Shyamalan himself, as has already been suggested, became almost synonymous with films with a surprising twist. It became one of his trademarks. The trailer for Unbreakable is more explicitly conceived as a puzzle. because we can ask a question: what is behind Bruce Willis's miraculous surviving of a tragic train accident? And based on the trailer, we can assume that the explanation will be somewhat surprising. And similarly, the trailer for The Village flagrantly indicates an enigma, what lies behind the village. And in the last shot, Joaquin Phoenix's character steps in that direction. On the other hand, most trailers present us with some sort of an enigma. So, you know, it doesn't have to be, it may not have to be limited to films with a plot twist. I think I'm running late, so I just mention one last example. This is one of my favorite trailers for Femme Fatale, Brian De Palma's films from 2002. This is one of the most original trailers I've seen because it fast forwards through the whole film, including end titles, in 2 minutes, dwelling slightly longer on the most dramatic or sexy scenes because it's sometimes described as an erotic thriller. And the trailer doesn't worry at all about ruining the audience experience of the actual film. At this speed, of course, the viewers cannot register any major plot turns, not even the extended twist ending, which, in an echo of Woman in the Window, reveals that much of the plot was a dream. And at the end of the trailer come the words, "You've just watched Brian De Palma's new film. You didn't get it? Try again," urging us to go to the theater to comprehend the narrative. So in a way, then, the trailer shows us all but reveals nothing. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them, obviously.